Good morning and happy Friday the 13th. Now, I've never been too superstitious about Friday the 13th at all. Uh, I know many people are. Many people are superstitious about the number 13 and things like that. And having just a couple months ago was Halloween and spooky stuff. Uh, Supposedly on Friday the 13th, uh, that's when all of the kings of Europe were to open a letter from the Pope saying to bust the Knights Templar. And so Friday the 13th, or maybe it was Friday the 13th when they executed Jacques Dimon. It's always been associated with dark stuff and spooky stuff. Uh, Now, that's not much of a segue to what I wanted to do this cold, spooky, dark morning where my lamp is out and but for some reason on my walk this morning in the rain, I started to uh, something reconnected in my brain, and I started to recite the very first poem that I ever had memorized, and it's a pretty long poem. For I memorized it. I was 10 years old. Okay. And in Nebraska, and unhappy being in Nebraska because it's not Southern California. Yeah, very similar to I'm kind of unhappy being in Sacramento because it's not Southern California, and it's a spooky, gloomy, rainy day, and I'm behind on a couple of deadlines, and I got to get writing uh, done today, which is all really happy problems. Okay, I'm not compared to 99.99% of the world's population. I've got it made, but it's still gloomy. And all of a sudden, the words just started to come back as if they were on a tape somewhere deep in my mind that I haven't accessed in a while. If that, it's sort of part of the magical process, or what makes a magical process work in both magic and Freemasonry. You got to memorize a lot of shit in Freemasonry if you want to qualify for uh, proficiency in your degrees. Uh, and I've memorized lots of like OTO initiation ceremonies where I've officiated at them, hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them. And so I've given my memory a workout every once in a while. And of course, in the AA, you memorize early on. You memorize chapters from the Book of the Law and chapters from a couple of holy books. But this one was kind of curious. And it was kind of dark because I was a melancholy 10-year-old in 1958 in Nebraska. I had only been walking around for like 4 or 5 years because I was, bedridden for the first few years of my life because of a hip problem. And during that time, I would listen to my brother Mark's record collection. And Mark was 6 years older than I, so in 1958, he was 16. And but he was gone a lot, and I was home a lot, and I listened to his records, and he had a wonderful jazz collection. Not that we had a big hi-fi or anything like that, but just a little portable record player. But I put it beside the bed and listened to the jazz albums. And he had a wonderful what they called then rhythm and blues. They didn't call it R&B. They call it rhythm and blues, and lots and lots of wonderful uh, black music uh, from the early days of rock and roll. And so he had a wonderful collection of blues, John Lee Hooker and uh, B.B. King. And so I really got indoctrinated into all of that wonderful music. And then when rock and roll came, we started listening to Carl Perkins and Johnny Otis and then eventually Elvis Presley and such. But I digress. One album, later it became two, that I listened to over and over and over again. I'm sure I just ruined my brother's LP. It was called Word Jazz. And Word Jazz was beatnik poetry read over a small jazz ensemble. Fred Katz was the ensemble. And the narrator, the poet, was Ken Nordine, Nordine, Ken Nordine. Now, if you were raised in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and up to the 80s, you would recognize Ken Nordine's voice immediately because he was the dramatic, sardonic voice of a million commercials, TV commercials. Pop, there goes perspiration. That guy. And he was, I believe, a Chicago, I would say disc jockey, but he was a Chicago late night radio personality. And if it's not Chicago, I apologize. It's anyway, we could pull it in Nebraska on a clear night. And he would terrorize the audience by reading Edgar Allan Poe, and he could interpret it he's just awesome. Okay, Ken Nordine. And the albums were Word Jazz and then Son of Word Jazz. And I listened to every one of those poems, and I could play most of them back in my mind anyway. But there was one called The Junk Man. Now, when beatniks are talking about junk, sometimes in those days they were referring to heroin, the junk man being your pusher. But that was only one facet of the junk man. It gave voice to almost all of the frustration I felt with the provincial environment that I was in. Not that there's anything wrong with provincial environments, but it was one of such willful ignorance, taking pride in their insophistication or unsophistication, ridiculing art and literature and dance, and I felt not only isolated from civilization in Nebraska as a 10-year-old, I felt isolated from humanity. And I don't know if you knew or remember what was going on in the world with the Cold War and the commercialism and the nightmarish flaunting of capitalist uh, hubris, okay, hubris. But I felt like the loneliest little kid in the world, and truly, I didn't see light at the end of that tunnel. And so I just ate up this beatnik pessimism. And if I would have been French, it would have really been bad. I am French, but I mean French. And this is the cut that I listened to over and over again, and I could recite it back from beginning to end. I can't do it now. I've written it out for us. But this is the poem, and I would do it to my classmates in grade school, and my teacher overheard me, and she was adventurous enough and impressed that the little 10-year-old had anything memorized. That in English class, one teacher taught all the subjects. Okay, it was like an assortment of one-room schoolhouses in Nebraska, and she allowed me to get up in front of the class and say it, repeat it, recite the poem, and I did gestures and and things like that. And of course, I had not a clue of the deeper meaning of it. But like poetry is like other kinds of great art. It is its own truth in itself. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a big musician to just completely be blown away by Beethoven. Okay, you don't have to be an art expert with a degree to understand the power and the significance of a great piece of painting. Okay, and certainly as a 10-year-old kid, I couldn't appreciate the dimension of this. But at the end, there was this ray of hope at the end of all of this melancholy beauty. And I guess it was that made me hang on to it. So, with your permission, and if I have enough light in my gloomy office, I'm going to read you The Junk Man by Ken Nordine. In a dream I dreamt there was no dream. In a sleep I slept there was no sleep. I met the junk man in his scattered yard. There, in a twilight of hush, my ears stared at the wag of his broken jaw as he ranted over the rule of ruin. And there, within my rusting headpiece, here were all metals turned inward. I eyed his arguments as a bargain of beads strung on the grieving yesterdays. And the junk man's words circled about my beef-free brain like crippled wings on a broken bird. No real flight in them. Come, hold hands with me. In this stagger of dark, and watch the junk man inventory his rust. Trace with our togethered intelligence, the rag picker counting his twisted treasures. Here in this jungle of jungles where all smiles must be down, don't leave go of my hand. Look how the madman of discard walks through the low forest of his possessions. There he stops, and with his practiced junkman's appraisal measures the meanness and the meaning in a bent frame of some lost courage. Now, his awful laughter beginning, he counts a stack of odd-shaped fears, and with his cash register eyes the price they'll bring from some young thing, you or me or anyone somewhat free, who happens to come here to build on these grotesque grounds. Don't be afraid, but don't leave go of my hand. I am no braver than you. We need our need of needing each other, and more, we need our need of not needing each other. Now, while the junkman is busy in his counting house, now, when the king of unkindness tells lies to himself in a D-value of values, help me in this crowded air of broken wings. Help me write melodies that we can whistle against the dark. Yes, now, when the junkman has made a yard of so many millions who have been disinherited from their inheritance, you and I will begin again, the beginning that will never end. We will mix ourselves together and throw our togetherness down to make the junkyard green with our cunning and careful. Then, in some tomorrow's tomorrow, on other wings will know that flight can be mended, and that the junkman who wants his books in the black, in a prophet of no prophet, the cheater of the cheated will make his idiot inventory against other eyes, with a difference. Our having given ourselves to the junkyard will give love and sanction. It is now that greatness will sound. In that then, there will be no weeping as the junkman lies weak on the memory of his bad bed. Look, even now as we hold hands separately, the crimson edge cuts across our silhouettes. Don't leave go of my hand. It'll be morning soon, and we can look at each other unafraid. And in that morning we will laugh until the tears run as we listen to the children of our children's children sing the many-melodied one song. The junkman will be there with them, but only in the black of their unremembered dreams. It's almost time to wake up. But don't leave go of my hand. Well, the grade school class didn't know what to make of that, and Miss Shoemaker or whoever it was that year just sort of giggled and thanked me, and most everybody else just thought, Lonnie's a pretty spooky kid. But I have to say, word eventually got out to the department head of the vocal music department of the whole school system. And shortly after that, they let me be in plays and things like that. Okay, that's my spooky Friday the 13th offering. It wasn't particularly occult or recondite, uh, but it was kind of Friday the 13th. Well, I'll see you tomorrow for Saturday morning cartoons, and maybe we'll lighten things up a little. Until then, don't be afraid to look up Ken Nordine, word jazz, and I'm sure you can play single cuts at a time. In that particular one, it was called The Junk Man. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.